Hello, in this tutorial I want to show how I created the water material for my game. I use a very common technique by scrolling two noise textures together to achieve this ripple effect. The nice thing about the stylized water is that you don't need any textures because everything you need is already implemented in Godot. So in my test scene, I quickly want to show what the water material is capable of. And if you are interested, you can follow this tutorial along. So, as you can see, we have a normal map and we also have a reflection of the water. We have a refraction so that the objects below the water get displaced. We can change the speed of the water movement and the direction. We can freely change the water color. And if I look from this position, we can see that the water has a wave movement, and we can also adjust the wave shape. You can also go for a very stylized look. For instance, if I turn the alpha off and enable unshaded, we have this look. And if you, for instance, played Zelda the Wind Waker, you can change the pattern of the noise so that the water has a look like that is very similar to the water from Wind Waker, in my opinion. You also have a ripple effect on the water that is also adjustable, so you can change the color of the edges, and you can also increase or decrease the scale of the ripples on the edges. So to create a new water, I delete this plane, and under my main node I add a new child node from the type mesh instance. Under mesh I decide to use a plane mesh, and to make it a bit visible I move it a bit up. So it's very small, so under size I increase the scale to, for instance, by 64 by 64. I make sure to cover the whole area. And under subdivision, I go with 16 by 16 so that the waves are visible later on. So now under material, I create a new shader material, and under shader, I create a new shader. I open that up, and the first thing we do is to find a shader type. Because we are in 3D space, we use spatial. And under render mode, I like to use the specular font, since it's a bit harder than the normal standard specular. And now I create my first variable. It's from type float, and I name it speed, and we give it a range from -1 to 1 and set the default to 0. So what we have now here under shader param, we can open that up, and now we have the speed parameter that we can change if we want to. And right now we can't do nothing with it because we don't apply the speed to anything. So next I create the variables for the colors. So these three variables are from type sampler 2D, and we will store our texture information in there. And these two variables are from type vector 4, and we will store our color information in there. So we can, under the parameters, we can, for instance, change the color to a bright blue and the edge color to a simple white. That is currently not visible since we don't set the color to the albedo output in the Fragment Shader. We do that later. I click on empty and create a new noise texture. And if we open that up, I want to enable seamless. And under noise, I create a new open simplex noise. And there I want to move this slider all the way up to 4 for a more detailed ripple effect. You can later change the noise pattern however you would like to look your water. So under noise 2, I do the same, create a new noise texture, enable seamless, and create a new open simplex noise. For our normal map, we do basically also the same, create a new noise texture, but we want to enable seamless and as normal map. I set the bump strength to 4. That is, in my opinion, a great value. That's not too hard or too soft. And we create a new open simplex noise. So now we create our fragment shader. So void fragment. And the first thing we want to add to our fragment shader is the time variable. So I say float time. And what we do here is we use the built-in function time and multiply it by our speed so that we can adjust the time. Now I want to create new variables from type vector3, and I name it n1 and n2. And what we do here is we use our noise texture and store the information in this variable. And for the noise texture we use the UV, and for the scrolling textures I add the first texture by the time, and the second texture, for the second texture I subtract it by the time and scale the time by 0.2, so that we have a scrolling texture movement that is not that doesn't follow a certain pattern, or that the pattern is harder to notice. So, and the next thing is we want to sum these two textures together. So I create a new variable named sum. And what I do here is I get the red output or the red color channel from my noise textures and add these two noise textures together. And then I subtract them by 1, so that I only have values between 0 and 1. What this basically means is 0 is black and 1 is white. And I can show this in the video output, for instance, is if I say sum, or I say vector3 sum, since my sum is a float, but I need a vector3, so I convert it to a vector3. And now we should be able to see the scrolling of the textures. And if you look in the brighter spaces, you can notice that this noise pattern, but we want it of course to look like in this scene. So what we do is we use the we use our color values that are from 0 to 1, and we clamp them into certain values. So for that I create a new variable called fin for finish, and I set it to 0. And to clamp my values, I can say it, for instance, like this. If my here created sum is between 0 and 0.4, so basically is it black, and between a black color and a gray color, we set the fin to 0.0. If it is between 0.4 and 0.8, we set the fin to 0. And if it is greater than 0.8, we set the fin to 1. And in my albedo output that I have to put at the end, I can instead I say sum, I can now say fin, and we should achieve this harsh ripple effect. But another thing we need is our color information. So I create for my color, I create a new variable from type vector4, and I name it col, and we assign our color that we created in the start for it. So it's just a color at the moment. Later on we want to assign our ripple color as well for it, but for now we only add the color. And moreover, I want my alpha output, so I say vector4 and name it alpha. And what I want is to get the texture, and what I want is the screen texture, and for the UV, the screen UV, so what we currently see on screen. And now we can go back to the albedo output, and we can mix these values together and can add our fin with our alpha and our color and our alpha output from our color we defined in our material. So if I turn the alpha value down, we can make the water transparent. So the next thing is we don't have any normal map support. So we created our normal map here. So what I want to do is to say normal map, and I assign the texture for it. And we created our normal map texture, so we put it in here and we say UV. And at the end point RBG. So now we should have a visible normal map. So if I turn the bump strength up, we can see it better. But the problem with this is that the normal map doesn't move. So for that I create under my where I assigned my noise textures, I create a new variable from type vector2 and name it UV movement. And what I do here is I get the UV and I multiply it by 4, so I scale the UV map 4 times. And to achieve the UV movement, from the movement of the UV, I say that I use my UV movement and add it with the time, multiplied by the speed, so that we can adjust in the speed parameter the movement speed. And I multiply it by 4, so that the water moves, the normal map moves a bit faster than normal. And now I can say right here UV movement. And now we should have a moving normal map. Weird thing here is that the water is darkened a lot by the normal map. So what I do is I use this, I copy it and delete it. And now I just paste it again. Yes, so what I want to do is, I delete it, I copy it in again, and now it works proper. I don't know why this is, but it's very confusing. I don't know the reason myself. And I set the bump strength back to 4. So now we don't have any reflection and the normal is very barely visible, so I use my roughness output and set it for instance to 0.01, a low value, so you can clearly see the normal map and also the reflection of the sun. And you can of course play with the normal map parameters. So the next thing is, so we want a refraction of the water. So I add a new variable and I add it below the sun. And I name it, it's from type vector2, and I name it displacement. And what I do here is I get my vector2, and what I want to have in my vector2 is the sun I created above. And I can now add to the screen UV from my alpha the displacement. So I say plus displacement. displacement. So I added the displacement, and now it's a very strong displacement, so I can scale the displacement by, in my vector 2, by, for instance, 1.15, 0.05, sorry. And now it's more appealing, in my opinion. So you can experiment with this value if you want to. And now we have a displacement. So the next thing I want to do is to create the form effect or the ripples on the edges. So for that we create 3 new variables from type float. The first is the scale, the second is a near, and the third is a far value. So these are important, so because if you imagine you look from the camera, and if you imagine a ray that goes through the water surface, and sometime later it will hit, for instance, the cliff. And to calculate that, we use a function that I name it rim. It's from a tutorial from Miziziziz. So what this basically does is to get the information if the distance between the edges or the surface of this rock, for instance, and the water has a certain amount, we can draw in for this pixel a different color if we want to. So we want in our fragment function, we want to add this, and I copy this in, and what we do is we create a variable for the depth and the position, and from our function we get the depth and the UV, and for our position we get our Z position, and the difference between these two is the two subtracted, and we can now add these created values and put it in our col, also in our variable named col, and we want to mix them together. So I delete my color and mix my edge color together with my color and the scale from the edge and the difference between these two values. Moreover, so if you look closely, maybe change the color, you can see this the edge now, but we want to move it as well with the other noises. So I go to my displacement right here, and what I do is I take the difference and add it by the displacement. And the x value for it, and I, for instance, multiply it by 50. Oh, sorry, I need to move this one up because I need the diff, and now I have the displacement effect on the ripples, and you can play with this value. You can look if you want very less displacement or a very hard displacement. So I go with 50, with 50 in this case. So that's basically everything for the colors, also for the fragment function. And now we want a wave movement. So for the vertex displacement, I create 3 new variables from type vector2 and name in wave strength, wave frequency and time factor. I decided to go with these values, but you can of course change the values however you like to. But in my case, I think the result is very nice. I create a new function named waves, and I assign a vector 2 for it named position and a float time. And I want to return a certain value. And what I want to return is this equation. And what this basically does is I have my sinus and I want to project the shape of the sinus for my waves, and I use my created variables in order to be able to alter the wave effect. So what I want to use my wave function in the vertex function, so I create my void vertex function, and what I want to do is I say vertex, but only in the right direction, so that the waves only be able to move up and down. And I add it by my wave function, and in my wave function for the position I use my vertices my vertexes for my x and from the x and y, so basically the plane. And for my time I just add the built-in function time. And yeah, that is everything. So you can scale up or down the wave movement, and you can, for instance, now apply the binormal and the tangent in the vertex function. But in my case I wouldn't recommend to do that, because they are hitting hard on performance to calculate the normals for every frame. So this is sufficient. And that is everything. That's everything from the water. Thank you for watching. Have a good time.